So I finished Mamiya, or rather the updated version of Mamiya. It's a long-ass name. It's like a shared illusion of the world's end. I talked about the original version ages ago, maybe like 4 or 5 years, I guess. I actually started reading it when part 2 dropped. I think it was like $15 for the DLC or something like that, but it wiped all your progress because there was like changes to the flow and to the plot, and I was like, what the fuck, I have to read all this again. And I wasn't even a fan of the changes, and I'll talk about that soon. I think it was Hida that came out, and I just never got back to it until way later, but every time I was going to start it, there was like always some kind of upcoming update to it. Like, wait, there's gonna be an extra plot thread. And then after that, they said like, hey, they're gonna add voice actors. Like, alright, I guess I have to wait. Except the dialogue audio is still only on the Switch, which is kind of an ass feeling when we already paid like twice years ago. I was like, what the fuck is this? Why don't I get voices? Just make it another DLC. It's like, no, fuck you. Anyway, a lot of the voice casts are spot on. Midori, Osamu, and the main Mamiya are perfect. I think Minato and his Mamiya had like a deeper voice than I expected, but more so on the Mamiya. He got a good laugh out of me when it showed up. Haruki was a little cleaner than I expected, and Natsume sounds dorkier than I expected, but looking back on it, I should have expected it considering his mannerisms. It was one of those things where it's like, oh, it's more on the outfit and the last bit of the second part that made me remember otherwise. The changes from the original till the Switch update kind of vary. Like in the initial rewrite, Ryou and Minato didn't have scenes together even though they were supposed to be like childhood friends. And that was technically important to the plot, except that part is put back in by now. It also felt like they reduced a couple things like the amount of fights Ryou was in or the scenes with Minato talking about like his song. And that's still the case right now. Is probably to improve like the flow of the plot, because technically the first section of each character is just to show like what their issues are and to connect with some of the other characters. So while I think the flow is going too fast at points, it was always the worst part of the title anyway. There was also other little things where I think Haruki's ailment is kind of tuned down, or different sections of Minato are handled differently and feels like a little less hippie. They still keep the songs around with Minato and Haruki though. It's like, wow, I was not a fan of the songs. Before, I think I had Ryou and Haruki as the top 2, but I prefer Keito over Haruki at this point. Well, based on the plot than the character itself. They also updated the scenes between the characters and the Mamiyas on part 1. I'm not a fan of the changes, it feels too extra. Basically, instead of the feeling of dread I get from the character, it's more like they're overacted like teenage angst. Fortunately, with every scene afterwards, it's pretty much toned down. Another thing was there was this like gacha element. I don't remember if it was there from the start or if it got incorporated like a week or 2 later after the initial release. And the gacha was just unlocking extra slice of life scenes and some like alternate bad endings. But they removed the gacha aspect of it, and now it's just like a really basic jumping minigame where you collect 3 pages. Honestly, I don't know why resources was put into that. I'm not sure which one is worse. It could have just been something like, hey, it gets unlocked and you just see them and that's it. I don't know why something... Well, I do by the end, but at the same time it's like not really needed. It's like a little hint, I guess, for one of the last parts of the title. I guess the last thing is the updated intro. I kind of go back and forth with it. Like, I didn't feel like it was needed and a little edgy, but nothing that ruined the mood anyway. But by the end, I see what they're going for, and it was awesome as long as you remember it actually happening. Because I don't think you can see it after the first like prologue intro. It's like you don't see it anymore. You have the updated scene and that's it. It was kind of like what they did with like Maria near the end of like Yumineko's chapter 4, I guess. Okay, so I went over the small changes between like the original part 1 and 2 and the updated one for the most part. A lot of the stuff I'll talk about is probably going to be in the spoilers, who knows. I feel like I'm just going to go on a tangent a lot and talk about each character for a long ass time, and then maybe the spoilers won't be as long anymore. But if it's part 1, then I won't dance around it. It's like an hour for each character. It's fine. The cast is split into 3 subsets. Really, each subset is its own cast that eventually converge here and there, but it's mainly the first 2. The initial cast you meet in the first part consists of Ryou, Minato, Haruki, and Keito. Technically, Natsume is also part of this cast, but Natsume is semi-linked to all of them, where they're all Natsume, but each character sees the Natsume differently, and that's because Natsume is dead. It's the first line you get in the title. The setting starts with you going to his own funeral, but you don't know who you are. But spoilers, yeah, you're Natsume, right? Your name is just placed as me. I don't know if it gets swapped to Natsume in part 2, but you go back to me eventually. You go through a small section for each character in part 1, which covers their bad ends and why their plot resets or restarts. The main character doesn't want that to be the future for them. To be fair, I feel like they could have been interspliced into one large ass piece, because seeing the same ending for Natsume lamenting on what happened is kind of a pain. Something also happens in the opposite way for the antagonist in part 2, but the only way to get around that one, I guess, is to either play it on the first route or after finishing all 4 updated routes, which is like halfway through part 2. Otherwise, I don't know how you'd fix that. And since I'm already here, the first 2 subsets have their own Mamiyas, so there's 8 in total. They're the reason why the first cast gets pushed into bad endings. In their perspective, they were helping. The kids were hurting and it was an easy fix. But for Natsume, it was like the Mamiyas weren't letting the cast try to somehow fix their issues. Yeah, it'd be rough, but there's a chance. It's this whole thing where the Mamiyas just see themselves as pushing the cast onto the trichilioclasm. This doesn't really get touched upon much. Like, it's there, but it's part of the third cast, and it's not really, it's not like an easy 1, 2, 3, but maybe the Mamiyas think it would be. Another thing is how Mamiya is typed is different depending on which Mamiya it is. I thought it was something like the ones with the uppercase are the ideas of what Mamiya is meant to be, while the one typed normally were the originals. It makes sense near the end of part 2 or maybe like at the beginning of part 3, though it's probably just some like katakana versus kanji thing where it's used as like a way to represent the uppercase Mamiyas as like immature or something. I guess like script versus print in all capital letters, something like that. Anyway, back to the first cast. I just had to cover Natsume first. Most of them are kind of in a shit place, but the idea is mainly they don't feel like they have a place to belong. They either feel misunderstood or they don't even understand themselves completely. Basically, they're easy targets to get groomed. Now, who's doing that? You can point to a couple of characters and who's to say, like, maybe he's the final boss, maybe not, maybe he's also a victim, who knows? And that's like part of the fun of it. Ryou is the first route I tried before, and I basically went through the same order this time, and I still say the path really is Ryou for the first and Keito as the last. Each character is going through their own shitty life. It's usually more of a mental thing, but Ryou is getting fucked over in all angles. Sure, Ryou has no dad and an abusive mother. It's important, but oddly enough, it's also the least of his worries. This section mainly revolves around violence and how he tries to keep it contained. He loves his little sister because she can find the beauty in the most like mundane places and either shows it to Ryou or pulls him over to see it. It gives him peace of mind and she's basically the only thing he considers valuable. There are some other plot threads that I feel like kind of got pushed to the side where it just feels like stepping stones towards like violent nature. He finds his own blood dirty, or I guess genetics is the better word. He's not his mom, but he can see the links of where he gets it from and he thinks it's something instilled in him from the start. The one I don't know how to link up is when he gets a small present. It was something he wanted when he was a kid, and it was the first time in a while that he found someone he can depend on. You can say that that was what opened the door to the bad end, but it doesn't really get brought up again. In the second part, he learns to defend Natsume, but his violent nature doesn't go away anyway. It just deterred him from like reaching the tipping point. It might just be used as a way to say that while it's important, it's already too late and his personality was already set. He gets into a lot of fights and even during the second run. Basically, he needs tethers to keep him from fucking things up, but shit always hits the fan and his tethers keep breaking to his dismay. Ryou is the one I like the most. He has some of the coolest scenes and overall probably the more relatable guy of the 4. You shouldn't really relate to him, but it's the closest of the 4. A lot of things is all these 4 have like very toxic traits when you hit these bad ends, and you should never like mirror them, but each character probably like, oh, I kind of feel that, at least when you're a kid or something. Minato is mainly 2 things. One is that he's a latchkey kid. In my area we had like a different name for it. It was like post-it note kid or something like that, where the parents just had like specific things the kid needed to do and they're just like displayed in there. It just means that their parents aren't really in their lives outside of providing for them. And the other is kind of like a mix of things. I'm not sure if it's a spoiler, you can see it in the first section, it just gets expanded upon, but the gist of it is that he doesn't really get himself. I think it's classified as like gender fluid these days. The rest is that he's a people pleaser to an alarming level. It's to keep up with social norms because he wants to keep himself in a box that's like marked as normal. And he keeps getting pulled into situations that make him uncomfortable and punctures his walls, and he keeps freaking out over it because like, man, shit's gonna hit the fan and you're fucking it up. He's musically talented and he's randomly really strong, and he still goes to this dojo. The dojo isn't all that important outside of like one scene. It's to explain away why Ryou is winning all these fights with random goons and Minato joined at the same time. I think a good way to explain this guy is like this character's like too busy or like too noisy. There's too many things going on with Minato, right? Oh, he's pretty strong. Oh, he can dance really well. Oh, he's really attractive and also good at acting. He's kind of supposed to be like Keito, but for Haruki, where on the surface their life seems to be going really well, but mentally they're kind of fucking themselves over a lot. He's one of those characters that pay off way down the line. Like, I find that he's kind of lame at times and like a stranger danger, pretty creepy sometimes, but he randomly pops out of like a great scene. Like, what the fuck happened? Why is it so good right now? It's just that you have to wait a long ass time all the way until like part 3. It's impactful, and to the point that he ends up being one of the more important characters, probably like the 4th most important, almost as important as Keito, right? But it's mostly in terms of like world setting. To be fair, they're all kind of important, but Ryou and Haruki are just like a step down because their parts are there more to reveal things about other characters. Where really it could have been slipped into a different route and not much would have changed. And that's funny to me because outside of maybe one scene with Natsume, I think Ryou probably has the best scenes in the title, which is pretty hard considering Minato randomly spiked up in the finale, or in his finale. Anyway, for Haruki, he's a weird one because he's like the loner punk kid, except he's in his 20s, but at the same time he's like very socially stunted because most of his life was like set in the hospital. Originally, I think he has more scenes about him being deathly sick, but they're not in his route anymore outside of like maybe the end of the first part. I'm not sure if they ever mentioned what he had, but at this point he has like just really bad asthma or something, but you rarely see it happen. I remember it sounding way more serious in the original. I guess they downplayed it and I was like, well, let's not go here. His route is more of a self-harm thing. Really, that's like a thing for all of the routes, but it's like very specific on this one. He smokes even though it's pretty bad for him. He's pushed people away even though he wants company the most out of the group. Something I forgot to mention is that while each character has like their own standalone parts, they come as in pairs. Like Ryou pairs with Keito and Minato is with Haruki, right? Like when you do Ryou's route, he interacts with Keito and vice versa. It's the same for Minato and Haruki. It's not like the rest don't talk to each other, but those are like the main 2 groups. Basically, each pair just foils for each other. So while Minato technically fits the mold for being like affected by social pressure and tries to conform, he's pretty much domineering when he's comfortable with the people he's around. Haruki, on the other hand, doesn't give a shit about what other people think. He doesn't know them, so it's not going to affect them. But at the same time, Haruki's like very scared of like, oh, if I do this or if I say that, will it piss them off? Will they go away? Well, it's like, should I even not talk to them at all because they're just gonna leave me anyway, and that kind of thing, right? And the other thing is like, oh, he has a rough appearance, but Minato would be able to beat the shit out of him too. It's like, it's pretty funny. Haruki is rather charismatic and also one of those people that jump from like one woman to the other to crash at their places. Dude is poor, doesn't have a job, and gambles whatever money he smooches off these people. It's how Minato and him connect. Natsume died, and Haruki needed another person that never gambled to bank on like beginner's luck. He does win quite a bit with that, and he brings Minato around to go along to eat, like, oh, I'm gonna go to this club right now, right? He's also randomly artistic, but it's more to say that anything that can be done by himself in a room, he's probably pretty decent at. Apparently, Minato is awful at drawing as well, or maybe even painting, I forgot, but it's funny. The last one is Keito. He's a happy-go-lucky guy. He has loving parents, he has a lot of friends, and he's good at sports. I think he plays lacrosse. It's just that to him, that's too normal, and subconsciously it bores him to tears. So that's why he's paired with Ryou. Ryou is very down to earth, he's hardened, he's like a defeatist, while Keito is very whimsical and idealistic. Ryou values stability and things running completely normal, while it's like a personal hell for Keito because he finds normal life a huge bore. It's one of those things where Keito doesn't understand that he's taking things for granted, but at the same time, you can tell that something is going on, and subconsciously Keito knows something is going on as well, and he wants to live his life to the fullest, even though what he wants is completely delusional. It's like, what are you doing? It's what led him and Ryou to interact with each other. Keito sees Ryou all bloody on the street, and his genius-ass self is like, hey, let me bring him to my house. Ryou has amnesia and doesn't remember shit, and days pass by and Keito's getting frustrated because nothing cool is happening. Because his delusional-ass self is conjuring like too many dumb possibilities of what Ryou is, because it'd be too boring for Ryou to just be a random guy. It's funny that in Ryou's route, Ryou also helps Keito out because he's also knocked out on the beach. It's important for later, but this is just a weird pair. He's probably like the second most important character in the title. He gets juggled with Mamiya and Natsume a lot, and you can argue for each one to be the top dog. Basically, if any of these 3 were missing, the trigger never starts and there'd be like no story. He's also the only one with an extra design than the others, and I'm not sure why. You get to see him in like one of the scene finales and then never again. It was really weird. The second cast is another 4, Osamu, Mayuri, Samejima, and Touma. They come a little after the start of part 2, and their parts are trickled in throughout. Technically, what I call cast 3 is already shown, it's like in the beginning of part 2, but they're not all there until part 3, so I'm just putting it later. Eventually in part 2, a choice pops up after you finish the updated routes for cast 1. You can get to learn more about the cast 2 character you chose. The funny thing is, from what I can tell, going through all 4 of them is optional, except I don't know how when they're all pretty much integral to the plot, and it makes the ending arc of part 2 way better, so I don't know how. The idea behind this cast is because all 4 of them have met Mamiya, but each has talked to a different version of Mamiya. Out of nowhere, none of them could find Mamiya anymore, and no one they talk to remembers Mamiya. So they group up in this pink house to talk about each other's like Mamiyas because they don't want to forget about their personal Mamiya. And it's all because these Mamiyas like guided them when they were like in a bad spot and supported them with what they were going through. Osamu is a writer, but his editor keeps putting his ideas down, and he keeps getting pissed until his Mamiya looks at his script and calls it shit, but it has a charm to it. Eventually talk about like, oh, he should convert it to like books for kids because they might notice the message Osamu was trying to put out. Osamu has a consistent like characteristic where he's soft. He has like a soft spot for anybody that read his novels. Osamu's my favorite character in like the whole freaking title. Samejima might be the third. Samejima is probably more interesting like plot-wise, but Osamu is just a great asshole character, and the voice actor does a great job on it. He honestly kind of steals the show when his sardonic ass is on the screen. He's also the only one that actually had a solid plan to push the idea of like Mamiya to the world. It just didn't pan out like he thought he would. Samejima works in the force but has trouble dealing with people. He's kind of a weirdo throughout the title. It's like he jumps back and forth between being very sophisticated and a goober. He's got like fox face trope going on. His Mamiya is a child he chased after and killed only to find out the kid can't die. Now all of the characters cast too are kind of fucked up, but this guy starts out the worst. Anyway, Samejima talks about that he doesn't really get how all of this social shit works. Mami says it's like a game. Samejima thinks that way of thinks are very childish, but Mamiya brings up like, hey, everybody else is actually subconsciously playing it. He just like never learned the rules. He finds life a lot easier after figuring out the rules, like, oh, I can do all this shit, right? But he's still a fucked up asshole, he's just containing it. Samejima and Osamu blast the other two out of the park. If Ryou and Keito are like Piccolo and Gohan, Osamu and Samejima are like Vegeta and Zarbon. They hate each other's guts so much. And the funny thing is, when they're not shitting on each other and it's like almost constant, it's because they both fucked up and are just running away from the other two out of like, oh, whatever problem they cause, like, I'm not dealing with this later. Mayuri and Touma are students. Mayuri's main thing is that she's really pretty and she hates it. She never got her own hobbies because of her mom. Basically, she wanted like a child version of herself. I'll go through her stuff for the spoilers maybe. Her mom is set as a teacher, kind of a weirdo, but someone she can talk to without them trying to like hit on her to the point that she starts liking him instead. It's not the most important aspect, it's more that she has a companion that she doesn't have to worry about because mommy has nothing to gain. She's not gonna backstab her. Touma is a music student that's already like talented enough to have an offer to be a conductor to the show. He's the most boring of the four. Hell, I think he's the most boring of the title, and so is his Mamiya. He is Haruki's older brother, and his dad is like a politician or something and wants Touma to be one too, but he just lets him go, like, yeah, just play your fucking music. Like, he still would prefer Touma not to, but he can't really force Touma to be a politician, right? Touma has a hard time expressing his thoughts and emotions, and Osamu shits on him for that and tries to help him out, and I don't think it really works at the time, until like way later. I think I've mentioned it before, where there's a lot of characters that are placed as triggers to make the plot actually work or start. Consider these guys as a whole unit, a Mamiya cult. They're tired of their lifestyle where it's basically them versus the world. Only they believe in Mamiya. Why are they outcasts when it helped them go on? So a lot of part 2 is about going through these ideas, them suffering through it. This leads them to diving further into their madness and figuring a way to keep the Mamiya thing alive, to make Mamiya real and force the rest of the world to acknowledge it. The last cast are the people outside of the world. It's the whole trichilioclasm thing. It's presented as pretty much like infinite library this time. Each book consists either like a different world or a specific story. I forgot if it's explained well. Basically, the title is all in one book and it's the only book that consists of their lives. I think the idea is the book's also contained and the whole town is detailed in that book, but it only shows the parts that the spectators care about. The gist is that there's a hierarchy in the whole thing. The normal people are on the surface level, and the beings in the library are the top outside of like the higher being that you only see like right at the end. Between those two are beings like Mamiya or any entity that's more like a strong idea. It's the whole memetics thing. It's also where the spectators descend to when they're looking inside their current book. Though beings like Mamiya, generally don't go to the highest plane unless something really fucked up happened because it's basically torture for them. It's explained in like part 4 or maybe part 5 depending on how you categorize things. The spectators are supposed to lose their memories when crossing over from the world to the library, but Natsume kept part of it. It's important to like halfway of part 3 to part 4. Natsume is a spectator, he's one of the few in the library. The spectators read the books and they have something off in them and then they correct it and then they start a new book. They're not supposed to be empathetic to the characters, they're supposed to be non-biased. Natsume doesn't like how the plot ends, so he keeps going back and trying to fix things, because yeah, it's their friends, right? So I guess you can say there's a time travel element to it, but not really. Natsume isn't the one time traveling. He possesses available bodies to interact with others, but that's technically illegal. He shouldn't be interacting with anybody. It's called a spectator for a reason. So I'll go back to this, but I might as well introduce a couple of the other characters. First, there's a librarian. She handles the exposition of the whole world and library and all that, but honestly, she's underutilized. She pops up here and there, but you think she'd be a lot more important than she ends up being. Then there's this guy behind that door. It's an area that's pretty dim, it's pretty dark. This guy basically gives Natsume advice on what he could technically do, even though it's illegal. Basically, he just tells him like, hey, if you don't get caught, it should be fine. But he's super boned if he does get caught. And the librarian actually does notice he's up to shenanigans, but just warns him. You only ever see the reason behind it like right at the end, and even that was more of like things just connecting into place. She might have not even been informed and it just worked out. The largest reason is mainly there's not a lot of spectators and they're always in high demand, so like, alright, I'm not gonna say shit. Anyway, the guy behind the door doesn't get a name. He does get a spray and he is important, but he's more of a plot pusher and provides like MacGuffin here and there on how to fix some shit when Natsume hits a wall, and it looks like he's forced into a checkmate. He just gets named as like senpai or senior in the English one. For the longest time, I thought the guy behind the door was like the original Mamiya, but it's not. It was pretty funny. There's also an extra character right at the start of part 3. He's like the second plot pusher here and there when the first senior's gone. And I phrase it that way because this guy says spectators lose their memories, so obviously they don't have names. So Natsume just calls him like Nidome or second senior. He doesn't even mind until Natsume mentions who the first one is. Apparently the first guy was also a troublemaker. This guy is less important than the first one. He's also kind of a petty asshole, but he helps out. Anyway, the important ones cast here are just Natsume and all of the Mamiyas, but specifically the main one, Yumehisa. I completely forgot where he got that name. So at this point, Natsume can rewrite parts of the plot, but not specific events unless there's like a lot of convergences, and he can trick what happened with a substitute. That's what kind of happens in chapter 3, even in chapter 4. He wants to save his friends, and he almost did, but their destiny won't allow it, so he joins like specific events together, and he creates a time shift where characters that weren't supposed to actually meet, and shit hits the fan really hard. And that's most of part 3. Ryou's sections are great throughout the whole route. Keito's a lot more likable this time around, and you learn more about Natsume, Mamiya, Yumehisa, and a little bit of the other Mamiyas. The pairs now have their routes interconnected where a huge part of the first half is the same and it diverges at the second half with still some parts that reconnect. Ryou's scenes are way more hype, but Keito's sections are better written, or at least I think it flows better at least. I didn't have as good of a time with Minato and Haruki. It felt like it took a while for it to actually start doing anything, mainly because it's a lot less extreme than the previous two until near the end, but that last third of Minato was freaking peak. But again, the dude is too busy. It felt like it was meant for like two characters. By comparison, Haruki doesn't have a lot going on for himself. He's more used as a vehicle to understand how Mamiya works or what like Natsume was going through and stuff like that. Touma is still a massive asshole. There's a lot of drama going around. It feels like a different title at this point. How it ends is still great. The brothers who had like different difficulties on expressing their emotions by either like running away or by burying them explode on each other. Is it as good as the scenes with Ryou? No. But I still liked it as like a more somber experience. They're normal dumbass instead of being freaks of nature like the other two. I think both pairs talked about the concept that each hated the other Mamiyas. They detested that the idea of a Mamiya being passed down wasn't their Mamiya. They feared that their Mamiya will go like snuffed out and that like a different Mamiya is making their Mamiya like minuscule. They liken it to something like, Protestants versus Catholics. You know, the top dog is still the same, but there's a lot of differences and they just can't agree. So that's why Cast 2 really hates Cast 1, or at least the ones that are not their Mamiyas is pretty funny. This is also where they specify that the uppercase Mamiyas aren't the idea versions, it's Cast 2 presenting themselves as Mamiya. Once their specific idea gets instilled onto the next person, it becomes title cased. They keep spitting concepts at you, and I'm already forgetting bits and pieces. Basically, Keito and Ryou's parts show what the original Mamiya was. Minato and Haruki are about like, oh, what happens after and what cast 2 was doing and how it's still affecting the rest of the cast. And even after all that, there's still the whole finale. At this point, I think I only finished half of part 3. They even reference it as like part 4, it's like EX or something, but still in part 3, it's weird. You finally know what's happening, why everything finally fit into place, and now the shared illusion starts. It's time for Mamiya to be in the spotlight. I'm skipping the rest, it's something you should experience for yourself. By the end, it'll feel like something was missing because, you know, there's a whole extra set of chapters that only gets unlocked by visiting the library again. This covers the rest of the plot, and Natsume going completely wild is fucking crazy. And then the extra epilogue after that, and I think this part was like the update. It was just to make a happier ending. It wasn't needed, but I liked it. It's like, oh, this is nice, but it's not like, holy shit. It's like, oh, it's just nice. The amount of CGs in this title is kind of crazy. There's like a little over 160 different ones without counting like alternate versions of it. And it's not like the very dumb ones like in some other titles where it's like, here's a new CG and then it's like, okay, why? It's like, it felt like, oh, they're trying to do a count. And this one feels like each one was placed specifically for it. You know, of course there could be more, but it's like, I never felt like, oh, this one looks dumb. It's like, no, all right, I understand why this one's here. A good 60 of them is on like part 3 alone. And what I mean is like, the half that they call part 3, because EX for me is still part 3, and that's like a whole other bunch of CGs. It's also probably the best set out of the parts, but part 4 probably has the most hype ones. The music is kind of all over the place. I'm not sure how much of it is like unique to the title. I know most of it are free tracks from like a bunch of different artists, except they match really well outside of like a few instances. And even then, the message of the song works well with the scene and what they're trying to portray. I just didn't like the song. My favorite was Parasite. I think it played like twice or maybe 3 times, and it's always when shit's like hitting the fan or it's in a fight, and it's like, oh, this shit is hype. Overall, it's kind of hard to explain why I like it so much. Like, it's written well and it's amazing by the end, but I think it's more that it feels different. A few months ago, there was like this interview with Yudoguchi, the guy that wrote Sangasaya, and the part I remember was that like, oh, the readers used to crave what he called poison, something that's different and something you hopefully won't experience in reality, but that's what makes it interesting. But now more often than not, more people want like more comfort from what they're reading than anything else. With all that in mind, Mamiya is more of a poison title. I liked it a lot. It's different. It's great, but it has like a really slow start. Like, with the original 2 parts, I gave it around a 7, and that was mainly with the last bit of part 2 carrying it a lot higher. Now, part 3 is more of an 8 on its own with like peaks at 9, and then the last part just pushed it to a 10, but considering you have to go through part 1 and 2 still, I'm putting it as a 9. It's one of my favorite titles in a long ass while. I probably have less things to nitpick on this one than like some other titles I set as 9s, and those are like normally considered like, oh, masterpieces. A better example I just thought of, right? I have Steins Gate as like an 8 or like a high 8, and this one's 9, so that's how much I like this one. So it's a title I recommend trying, even though you might have to power through the first part, because I know if anyone was like praising it this much and I got to part 1, I think you're crazy. Like, why'd you put this as a 9? Are you stupid? But it's like, hey, after everything, it's like, this is great. And if it can sound like a very petty bitch, this is what I was expecting when people praise Tsubahime so much. So this is the spoiler section. I'll be covering like a couple things here and there. I'll be jumping around a lot. I doubt any of this actually even makes sense. Samejima technically didn't instill a Mamiya to one of the kids. It's meant to be Keito, but he found him to shine too much. Like, oh, this guy's a nice kid. I don't want to deal with him. He played with the rules. He went into society mode, right? Keito is also one that died early, and when things were converging, Keito just dies because Natsume said what year it was. So then Natsume had to converge the 2 deaths, and it was no longer Natsume's funeral, it was Mamiya's funeral, and gets all 8 members together. But technically that's way later. That's like halfway point of part 3 to, I think it's called like part EX or something. Until then, the cast was like in this limbo created by Natsume, killing off his own persona. He's no longer Natsume, he's just referred to as like me. And he can't interact with the cast anymore, which was already a problem to begin with, and Mamiya was trolling him about it like all of the part 2 routes, because what Natsume did, it was like exactly what Mamiya did. He left 4 people that were depending on him, and they're just crashing out. It's like, where the fuck did he go? What do you mean Natsume never existed? What is this shit? Anyway, by the middle of part 2, you know that each of the cast 2 characters has some kind of interaction with the cast 1 characters. Osamu dated Ryou's mom and instilled like his Mamiya onto Ryou. Midori is actually his kid, but that's not important for the stuff I'm going for. Osamu wrote a book about Mamiya, and apparently Mamiya started with like Keito. Natsume and Mamiya were Keito's imaginary friends, and Keito was losing the ability to see them, and Keito wanted the Mamiya to stick around forever. I forgot. I think it's because Keito either moved or changed classes and he lost some friends. But at the same time, Mamiya was already set to be born into like a real body, but decided to stay and let Natsume take his place, which pretty much fucked a lot of things up. And Natsume had like two souls intertwined, like one as a mental thing, one as the body. And it's basically what led to Natsume to die. His body wasn't taking it. It's also why Minato and Yumehise looked alike. Pretty sure that was going to be Mamiya's body, or rather, there originally was like twins and one vanished, and I think the idea was like, oh, Minato was meant to be Mina, but then it merged and he became both. Anyway, backing up a bit, Keito writes to Osamu saying that he also knew Mamiya, except it was a different Mamiya again, because, you know, Mamiya started with Keito, not with Osamu, and Osamu couldn't let that happen. It's like, what do you mean my Mamiya doesn't exist? So there's this whole thing where Osamu is trying to instill his Mamiya onto Ryou, but also having Keito there as like a sacrifice he makes, or at least he tries to make Ryou kill Keito. And there's like all these time shenanigans where Keito and Ryou kept saving each other depending on the time range. Minato and Haruki was also sexually assaulted by Mayuri. Mayuri has been assaulted quite a few times, so it's one of those loops where the victim became the predator and that kind of crap. Haruki was technically consensual, but I'm pretty sure he was still underage, so it's not. He was just okay with it. Minato, on the other hand, got like super trauma out of it, and that's part of where Mina started happening. Mina is what he calls himself when he puts on the maid uniform. Even without that, he still likes Touma, and also he likes this other random girl that pops up here and there. He's pretty much bi, but he's also gender fluid. He's busy. He has so much shit. He also lost his memory once and started going out with this other girl, but the girl was more interested in the cross-dressing side and that he forgot about. And it's like, why does she hate me? What the fuck's happening? And she's like, why don't you cross-dress? That's exactly what I was into and you don't do it. So the whole thing is Osamu hates Keito, and Samejima and Ryou have like way too close of the same energy or vibes or whatever you want to call it. They're like the classic tiger versus dragon thing. They are not people. Ryou's ending is really these two duking it out and both of them having like the time of their lives because they stopped suppressing their violent impulses. Keito's ending, on the other hand, is just forcing Osamu to keep on writing. He's like, I'm your boss now. And he's like, can I have a break? And Keito's like, no, keep on writing. Keito's really strict. And it's like the same with the other two, kind of. Mayuri hates Minato, but finds him attractive. Touma hates Haruki because he lost control of Haruki, and at the same time, Haruki still talks to his mom even though she divorced the dad, and Touma's like, what the fuck? It ends with Mayuri also having like gender dysmorphia, and there's this whole like party scene where Minato is dressed as Mina and Mayuri's dressed as a guy, and they're doing this like some dance battle thing, and I think Mayuri's like trying to stab him or something, and it becomes like a whole mental battle thing, and she's losing bad. Haruki and Touma was more of like a slugfest, but unlike Ryou and Samejima, they suck at fighting. And now I'm skipping through a lot, and Natsume sacrifices himself and gives the book for safekeeping to Mamiya because he becomes like a pseudo spectator. So he's in the library trying to get Natsume back, which leads to like this burnt book, and it's like an alternate telling, and Mamiya actually got his body, and the dude is basically coming. He's like, with how different everything feels because he's alive now, he's real, and he's like, oh, shit, how do people walk? This sucks. Why does running hurt so bad? But he's still like, this is the best. This is amazing. Only to see like an edgy version of Natsume, and they just like semi-duke it out. Mamiya just getting destroyed. Still skipping a lot, but Natsume is tired of his shit and starts like burning everything and killing Mamiya. But Mamiya is like, I placed myself in so many books. Good luck finding them all. I will never die. I will keep trolling you somewhere. So Natsume jumps into all these books to find them and keeps on killing Mamiya, only for him to say fuck it. And it's like his super rage. It's some stupid shit, and somehow fire starts shooting everywhere, and he's just burning down the infinite library. And the librarian's like, what the fuck are you doing, you freak? Stop doing this. And he's like, nah, this is my story. He's burning everything. And this is the whole thing. It's like, oh, how do I kill this white raven or whatever it was? Like, well, let me kill all ravens and it will be dead. And there's a lot more going on. I'm sure half the things I mentioned makes no sense, but it's about parts I thought were either funny or pretty hype. Like, there's this whole thing, like, I think I talked about, like, part 3 to the half point, and then after that, it's like, I talked almost nothing, because it's like, there's 2 Natsumes now, it's like, what the fuck is this shit? And then it's like, oh, they're on the bridge again, and, like, the town is conformed, because there's, like, all these illusions and crap like that, and everything's breaking apart, and then, like, Samejima's on this car, and it's like, nah, man, just push the accelerator, and he's going through walls and shit. It's really cool. It's really funny. It's kind of like Yumi Neko again, and like, I think was the chapter 8? where it's like everything is just breaking apart. And I felt like this again, just a lot shorter. Because really this VN is like maybe 30 hours long. But yeah, that's about it. It's very fun.